Hey Jeremy, how's it going?
All is well, Aaron. How about yourself?
Good. How's the recruiting world treating you?
It's fun, I can say, but it has its pitfalls, but it also is fun at the same point in time. So no complaints my way.
Yeah, that's good. Well, yeah, let's talk about some of those experiences from. I mean, we all want to know the recruiter side of things, but we'll talk about the recruiter side and also the candidate side because you get to, I guess, role play both when you're
Definitely.
with with clients or with candidates that you're looking to place. So you have
Mhm.
expertise on both sides of the equation. Uh,
Definitely. It's like I said, it's an equal balance, but you got to have the two parties come together to make it work.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I've been talking with recruiters that primarily work with senior career applicants who maybe are a couple decades in and are pretty far in and looking for C-suite positions. And I know you work across the board, but it's interesting with you because you also work with helping with job placements right out of school. So for those that just entering the workforce for the first time, for real. And I'm wondering what that experience is like.
Well, the how it started with us is that we started reaching out to colleges and universities, pretty much predominantly in the South, and we noticed one thing right off the bat. It was the one thing that was very consistent across the board is that they really used one system, and it was called Handshake. And you're just basically putting students into a database, and you're just hoping for the best that the companies will reach out to them and potentially offer them a position. Well, what was missing was that personal touch, reaching out to the actual student, talking through their actual resume, talking through what they really wanted to do. Because we know students coming out of college, yeah, they may have a degree in something, but that mind is going to change if they see something that else that they're really interested in. So our primary focus was to speak to those students, have those conversations, and then work through to finding out what was their real niche. What was the one thing that they were really good at, or really something that they really wanted to do. And with a few students, we were actually able to be successful in getting them actually placed. But also, you have those students where they might have had an internship and they're like, I don't want to do this. Is there something else that I can pivot off of? And then you're going into those developmental conversations to finding out, hey, well, what is it that you really like to do? And that's just part of the recruiting game.
Mhm.
But also something else that we noticed while we were recruiting the students is we started talking about career services. And I could probably talk for days on that, how important it is for the colleges and the universities to have a great career services department. And if they don't, we need to make sure that we offer a class, maybe their senior year, their first and second semester, to where they are ready from a interview perspective, from a resume perspective, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's unpack that. Let's talk about both. So the like we'll call them new graduates that are committed to maybe a specific field or discipline, and they stay on that track. And we'll get back to the ones that maybe need help finding their way. But for the ones that are on their track, I don't know if it's going off of ratio or just the sheer number. But every year that goes by is another wave. Obviously, some leave the workforce and retire, but a
Mhm.
new wave of those maybe hungry to get in, right? Um,
Yes.
how do you see? I don't know if it's a ratio or just analytically or you know anecdotally. I mean, the opportunities that are out there versus the sheer number of candidates that want in. What does that experience look like when they know what they want and they're kind of ready to sink their teeth into it?
When they know what they want, if I'm giving a percentage, I would say probably 65%. The ones that really know what they want, they kind of are ready to dive in. That other 35, you probably have a little bit of uncertainty. They're still trying to figure out what it is as far as their field. They probably have heard from someone, oh, this field doesn't pay that well, or you have this. Those kind of conversations I would have probably started to have their freshman and sophomore years in college. to let them know kind of what they're prepared for. But you have a student that's eager, hungry, ready to get into the job force. That's 65%. When we start having those conversations, they really have everything kind of laid out. They
Mm,
already know what they want to do, and they're coming with a full package, and you're like, okay, you have your cover letter, you have your resume ready to rock and roll. It's in the correct format. That lets me know that you have spoken with the right people. You've actually had some good mentorship, or if you had an internship, someone was able to kind of take you along the way of exactly how this needed to look. And then from there, it's reaching out to the companies and finding out exactly, hey, how can we get this person placed? Now, with that 65%, it's hard because the first thing that they're going to say is, well, they may have an internship, they may have a degree, but you're going against candidates that have 10, 15 years of experience
yeah.
in a field. So the position that they could be looking for where they're trying to get mid-level, they may have to start entry level, and that doesn't please every student. Most students will say, well, I was looking for this or I was hoping for this. And I always say, go back to them and say, never sell yourself short. You believe in who you are. Your internship and your recommendation letter that came from them, that still stands. Do you have to have a sense of humility a little bit? Yes. But at the same point in time, I never tell the student to say, okay, if this job offer came through and you don't like it, let's move to the next one. Let's find exactly what you're looking for. So I would say ratio wise, 65%, just about from what I've noticed, know exactly what they want and they're ready to rock and roll.
Mm,
The other 35, which we can have a conversation about,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they're kind of on that fence.
So within the six, we'll stay with 65 for a second. Within that 65%, and those that know what they want, and they're about as lined up as they can be because they've done their prep work, they know what the field entails and all those things. Um, do you find that they that when there's maybe that the reality check, right? You can't walk in as CEO on day one necessarily. Do you,
Right.
do you find that there's that they that what their expectation is lines up with reality most of the time, or there is kind of a, well, you have to start at this position and then you kind of work your way up. Um, do you think that they, along with all that preparation, are they prepared for the role that they're intended for, or do you think that they're at times over being over ambitious, let's say, in a good way, but it doesn't necessarily align with what the hiring side would be looking for in a candidate of their experience.
It's a little bit of both that I find. That over ambition I expect because they're probably coming out saying, "Hey, I got a 3.95 GPA." There is not too much else that I could have done while I was in college, and then you were coming off of, let's just say, a 3 to 6 month internship, or an externship, depending on what field that you're coming from. They're probably saying, "Hey, I've done the legwork. Now I'm ready." I'm ready to jump and dive in. One thing that they don't see and don't realize is culture. That's something that I always ask about. Well, what about the kind of culture that you want to actually get into, and who you're going to be working with on a day to day basis, because you're the you could be the 20 to 25-year-old that's coming fresh out of college, and you're going to be working with someone that could be, let's say, 30 years your senior. Are you going to be able to work with them? Are you going to be able to understand how they work on a day-to-day basis and be able to, maneuver around their actual workload, because they could be the ones that are training you to start. So you can't get discouraged, but also you need to encourage yourself to say, okay, I'm fresh at this, I don't know this, let me come in here, humility, work for X amount of time, and then start to work my way up. I've seen people skyrocket right out the gate, that maybe within 6 months they already have their first promotion. Sometimes for others, it takes a little time. It might take a year or two for them to be able to get where they're wanting to get. But at the end of the day, you're gonna be able to find where you want to go. And another thing that I always tell them, it's okay if it's not working out with a company within that first year, it's okay to find another company and until you find your comfort spot. Um, I notice with a lot of recruiters, they always say job hopping is not good. I kind of go the opposite way. If you're trying to find the culture, if you're trying to find the pay, if you're just trying to find a senior level position, whatever it is, whatever what motivates you, and that's sometimes the questions that don't get asked in the beginning.
Mhm.
Those are the questions for me from a recruiting standpoint. You need to ask in the beginning. What is it that motivates you the most? Is it power? Is it money? Is it culture? What is it? And then once you've answered those questions, then I know what I need to do as far as getting you placed. Um, that's just the recruiter side of it, and how it works. But that 65% and how it is, it's a balance. It's almost like you're juggling.
Mhm.
So you're gonna find those ones that are gonna go straight through it. You're gonna find those ones that have to job hop in order to get where they want to go.
Right, right. And find their longevity within that position, or maybe, like you said, maybe move around. It's not
Yes.
as frowned upon as it used to be to
Yes.
to to uh, to hop from one to another, as long as you're building a track record, right?
Yes, and that's the most important part, making sure that you keep a record of the things that you've done, and therefore that you can update that resume on the fly.
You know,
And also don't burn the bridge.
yeah.
If you are in a culture that just is not working for you, then have a conversation with your manager, boss, whoever it is, and say, hey, is there anything else that I can do while I'm here? I'm looking, I'm searching, I'm trying to find what's best. Don't shy away because sometimes you don't ask the question that needs to be asked.
Mhm.
And if you don't ask that question, then the person on the other end will never know.
Right.
They're going to be just sitting there saying, and it's the same thing from a recruiter standpoint. Or if you went out and went and got a house, if I'm a realtor, I need to know everything that you want. If I don't know what you want, I get you placed, then you're unhappy. Then you come back to me and say, well, I didn't want this. Well, I didn't know that you wanted this in the beginning. So having those conversations, asking the right questions, I know it's hard for any 20 to 25-year-old, but you have some 20 to 25-year-olds that are very mature and they're ready to rock and roll and they know exactly what they want, as far as going into their careers, even if it's starting their own businesses. I've seen it all.
Well, and with the 65% that we're talking about that are pretty set and ambitious and on a specific track, you figure at some point they find their stability, or they're thriving, or they get their progressions, and they're, not that you're done with them by any means, but the need shifts, right?
Correct.
Uh,
The conversations never stop.
right,
It's for me, I think with recruitment that we sometimes forget is that, yeah, they got placed. Now it's done. I don't have to worry about them again.
right,
I feel like that needs to be an open line of communication, especially within the first 12 to 18 months,
right.
because that student that is now becoming a professional could change their minds. And you need to make sure that, hey, how's everything going? What's going on with this job? Or from a standpoint of just statistics, you can always say, well, every time I get someone placed with this company, it hasn't been a fit. What's the problem? And if they come back with the same issues over and over again, you're going to be hesitant to place anyone with that company ever again. In other instances, you have those success stories where they're loving their job. You can see progression on LinkedIn. If they have a Facebook account, or an Instagram account, they're talking about their career and they're loving it. All right, statistics, going back to it. Here's the success rate. Here's what this company, they're showing us this, and this. Fine, let's make sure that we continue to plug this company and keep pushing this company every single time that we get ready to place someone. That's important. So I say in the recruiting life, I know that most will say, Jay, that's impossible. But if you take more of a hands-on approach, I don't care if it's 50 candidates, and you
Mhm.
kind of do some follow-ups, how hard is it to send an email? How hard is it if you have their direct contact? Pick up the phone and say, "Hey, how's everything going? Just wanted to check in with you." It's not hard. We need to be more personable in our human resources, and that to me has fallen off big time. I kind of call it non-human resources.
Mhm.
We kind of forget, as a recruiter, you're part of the human resources process.
Yeah.
That's what I look at. So make sure that you're still keeping that human side, because you're asking them to show some humility where you're not even being human. You're turned into a robot.
Yeah. Well, when I would presume you have to be the opposite of that. You have to be in any given moment a coach or an advisor or a support pillar or any of those things. Especially now, we'll shift over to the 35% that maybe have more ambiguity about their future and
Yes.
anxiety and don't know what they're doing to a T, um,
Mhm.
which is part of life. You figure those things out. Um, but there's points at which you actually train candidates and give them guidance. You're not just walking them over to an open position and saying best of luck and calling it a day. You're giving
Yes.
them advice, and that goes from presentation and how they sell themselves as a candidate,
Yes.
and through the interview process too. Can you kind of explain what that's like, and especially the coaching you do around interviewing and the advice you give there?
So a little bit, I'll start with that 35 a little bit, just to kind of give a little of what that insight looks like. The student that doesn't know and they're kind of confused, and they probably had the externship that didn't go well, and they're like, all right, Jay, I don't want to do this. And I always ask, well, what is your niche? What is your skill? What is one thing that you do on a day-to-day basis that you just love to do? If I get that one thing and they've shown me that they are really good at that one thing, I'll say, okay, well, you're turning into an expert, the subject matter expert into it, then I
Mhm.
can get you placed there. And I can say probably on a rate of about maybe 60 to 70%, you get them placed in something else that they didn't even major in. They love it because, all right, they found that niche, they found what they were looking for. Then you have the other 30, I would say 30 to 40% that it's just not working. So you go down a path of, all right, do I need to get you another certification? Is that something that you're interested in down the line? Yes, your degree, it matters. A bachelor's, a master's, or if you excel to all the way get into a doctorate, it matters that you got that degree because it shows that you went through some things,
Yeah.
you persevered to get there. Okay. Well, tell me, going back to the conversation, you're going into your interviewing process. All right, what are some of the questions that you actually received during that interview? Or what are some of the things that you have on your resume? And you may look at the resume, you tweak it a little bit, and you say, okay, well, we're going to change your niche from this to this. And that's where you're just constantly kind of juggling a little bit, but you're trying to make sure that they're going to be somewhere where they're going to be successful. Now, that going to the interviewing process for any of them, I literally tell them all, be yourself and be very confident in the things that you have done. Um, and it's hard for anyone to get relaxed because I'll tell you, I'm 40 now. If I'm having an interview with anyone, probably 30 minutes before, I feel it right here. It is always right here where I feel it. And I'm just like, okay, let me calm down. Let me find the things that I do. And I kind of take my mind in that to that other place. And I'm like, I'm ready to rock and roll. But everybody doesn't have that. They don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So is that a teachable skill? It can be, but it also is a very hard thing for some people because anxiety hits and they just don't know how to deal with it at all. And I'm like, okay, well, what is the one thing that calms you down? Is it going running? Is it going walking before the process? But getting into the interview, I just try to make sure that I do some pre-interviews with them to
Mhm.
where they're getting coached. They kind of understand, hey, I might shoot 7 to 8 questions at you, and I'm like, okay, here's what potentially you could be asked, or you could be asked a question that's very similar to it. How are you answering those questions? And then that kind of lets me know if they're ready or if they still need a little bit more work than what they have actually already had. Um, I always say if I can get you on a scale of 1 to 10, if I can get you to an 8, I feel comfortable that you're ready to go forward with that interview. If you're still not there at an 8 scale and I still got you on a 7, I might have some more additional calls with you just to make sure that you have an understanding of exactly what that needs to look like. The post interview is to me one of the most important things that is often missed in the world of recruiting. People forget to say thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Thank you for interviewing me on today. I think that's something in recruitment that is a lost art. And then asking for feedback is another thing. What if you did not get the position and you have that hiring manager and they've been on the phone with you, or they had a video call similar to this, and you're having a conversation and you're like, okay, well, what about feedback? And you're going to get some feedback from some. Doesn't happen all the time, but I always say, make sure you say thank you, ask for feedback. Therefore, the next time that you have an interview, if you didn't get this position, you know what to kind of do better.
Right.
Whether if it's, eye contact, whether if it's your appearance, whether if it's how you asked or answered a question. Um, there's just a plethora of things that you can get out of that feedback that you can dissect on how to making yourself better as a professional. So let's have the conversations. Let's do interviews. You're during your interview and then your post interview to me it's that three scales. You got to be on it. You need to make sure that you understand exactly what that looks like. But that post interview, if you don't have if you've never gotten feedback from anyone during your interview process, then you're just going into interviews to me blind. You have no idea exactly what you need to make better,
Right.
or what can make you better as far as going through the interview process.
Right. Well, and when you've prepared, you go through the preparation with candidates and you've, like you said, you've kind of tapped in and identified what they do best. And then they can go into an interview situation with the confidence that it's geared toward what they're excited about, what they do
Yes.
best. We'll call it their superpower. I presume
Yes.
that goes a lot better than if they have ambiguity about, what even their strengths are and what they would bring to an organization.
Yes, and your strengths and what you bring to an organization, organizations want to hear that. But if you didn't say that during your interview, then okay, this person that interviewed you will be able to tell you if you gave them exactly what they're looking for because they're taking notes. They're like, okay, this is good, this is good. This might not be something that I'm looking for, however it is, but make sure you get the feedback. And again, it's a lost art when interviewing because you could have 10, 15 different interviews and you haven't gotten a position and then you're sulking and complaining and you're not understanding exactly. Well, you never asked these certain questions
Yeah.
to find out why you didn't get the position. Or you probably had on the flip side of that, you had an outstanding interview and you didn't follow up.
Right.
Okay, so the company may be saying, well, maybe you're not interested in us. So how do you need to make sure that you follow up because it could be 2 weeks down the line. They give you a call and say, hey, we have a new position for this role. Da, 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 da. Da. You interviewed outstanding with us. Hey, could be an opportunity. So never miss an opportunity that is given. And I always say that is an opportunity that you should be taking advantage of.
Yeah. Well, I figure for some candidates, they are the right ingredients. They're everything the company or the institution wants.
Mhm.
But there's some disconnect. There's something that was missing in the way that they presented, or the way that what they focused on during that interview process. Again, we call it a superpower or what the assets that they bring to the organization. But I presume also some early stage or early career candidates might come to you and say, "Here's facts about me, right? Here's my
Yes.
degree. Here are my prior experience, my internships, my whatever it is." But then when you say to them, "Well, what do you like doing?" And they light up.
Great.
And what is that moment like when they when you tell them, "Well, that could be a career, right? There's people will pay you for that." What's
Oh,
that moment like of realization?
oh my goodness. It's I had one candidate. that I spoke with, and I'm watching the resume, I'm looking at all of this, but I'm hearing them talk about something else the entire time. And as they're talking about that, I'm like, okay, let's stop. I'm basically clearing the deck at that point. Is this something that you like to do? Is that's your creative niche? And they're like, oh, well, it's just something that I do on the side. I don't think that's something that you want to do just on the side. I think that's your career. I think that's what you need to kind of go into. And you'll never think. They'll be like, well, I didn't think that I could do this. So you start pulling up graphs and potential pay and what it looks like. And I'm like, you could do this and you can start your own business doing it. You don't even need a company to do this if you chose to. But if you want to start off at a company, gain some experience for 2 to 3 years, here it is right here. This is the path that you need to take. That candidate got that job. That candidate now at the age of 27 has her own business
Mhm.
and she's running with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sometimes it's not about 10 to 15 different skills that you have. It's about that one that you have that you can hone, that you can craft, that you can make it with just that one, and you don't need anything else. You just run with it. Then you can start building up your other skills to go along with that, no matter what it is. But finding that one is so important because if you don't have one, you got nothing. You
Yeah.
can have you can talk to 20 to 25 different things that you have on your resume. You can talk about the core competencies that you have at the top of your resume. I can tell you some companies look at that as fluff. It's just fluff to them on a resume. They're like, okay, well, what is it that you really do good? Because that's what we need for our company. We need 1 to 2 different skills that are really good, but hone in on that one because that one could be your career changer. You don't need 10, 15. You can have a successful career or a successful life with just that one. You don't need anything else. So I try to balance them out by having that talk with them to say it. y- I think the how do I say this? I think their expectations of exactly what companies are looking for, they're kind of just way out there in left field. I
Mhm.
try to bring them back in to where they're right there in the room with me. Sometimes they're probably in the next room and I'm like, "Okay, get back here. Let me show you exactly what they're looking for." Once you have that talk with them, have that conversation with them, it changes. It's like you're building and instilling confidence in them because they're like, oh, I can do this by doing this. Yes, yes, with no issue at all. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Take a stab at this. Trust me, it will work. And she got her experience and now started her own business. And that's at 27. Imagine what else that you could do in
Yeah.
that time frame.
Yeah. So in a hiring situation, what would in terms of finding that key, uh, the bit of magic or the superpower, what does a before resume look like? You mentioned fluff or how it's perceived. How is a before resume perceived versus an after when it's really honed in?
Oh, I've seen some befores that are already in the after stage. I've seen some befores that they need a lot of work. Um, Formatting of a resume, how it looks, it can be different. There are so many different resume writers out there. There are so many different programs where you can upload a resume into to talk to, okay, well, you need to better this, and this. How I look at it is if you have your name, if you have your title, if um, you're putting your information at the top, then you're talking to your core competencies. I feel that you don't need 15 different things up there. I feel that 5 to 10 is enough just to say, okay, can I talk to each one of these skills in my interview? Because what if I ask the question, and I've posed this to several candidates. What if I asked a question about every last one of those core competencies, but I did asked it indirectly? How would you answer those?
Mhm.
And you should see some of the blank looks I get because I'm like, okay, you're going to have to answer to all of this
Right.
potentially. Then you're working into your experience and into your education, and then potentially maybe even into your references, and which some companies do call to find out exactly, hey, um, I have a resume for XXX. This person stated this. Can you confirm that? And those phone calls can lead to a successful interview, and to where you can get that interview, and then after the interview, you get a job offer.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of work. I can, and this is why I always go back to saying that where that career services department is so vital and important, because students are literally going into a Word document. They're probably taking something off of what they saw off the internet, and then they're reformatting it into what they are. And I'm like, you can't speak to this. You can't speak to this. What about this? What's this skill? Tell me, where did you get this from? Tell me where you got the skill from. If
Hmm.
you're only telling me that you did it for one day, you're not a SME in it. So, SME, subject matter expert. If you are a subject matter expert in it, this goes for anyone. Make sure that is in your core competencies and in your skills. Those are the things that should be highlighted at the top. When those things are not highlighted and you're just kind of average in it, it's going to show when they get ready to interview you, and then you can't answer to all those questions.
Hmm.
And then after that, making sure everything is kind of neat and in the same person. So I don't want to have, let's say if I had a job from 2 years ago, well, those things should be in past tense. If I'm at a current job, those things, if I'm writing about my experiences, those things should be in present tense. Just little small little things that people pay attention to on a resume, just to make sure it's perfected. And no resume is ever going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But I always say to the ones that are at the higher standard, they're going to look at those subtle things, but those core competencies, make sure that you're a SME in them. Don't just put them down just to say, all right, well, I'm good at this. Well, then someone asks you a question about it and you can't answer the question at all. So be careful when it comes to that. But students, very, very much so, need to be very careful with that, because that's sometimes how you can get passed over immediately when it comes to the interview process.
Right. Right. The first question that pries a little bit, if you don't stand up to it, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter how good you are elsewhere, right? It's a,
Yes.
yeah.
It doesn't matter at all. If you bomb the first question, just imagine, like after that, maybe the second, third, fourth, they may have it on a weighted scale, to where, question number one, that's 50 points. Hey, I need to make sure that I hit that question.
Yeah.
If you can't answer that question and you didn't give it to your best, they're moving on to the next candidate immediately.
Right.
So it's making sure that you understand exactly what you're walking into. And then post interview, when you're done, or let's just say during the interview, when it's time to say, ask questions, let's really ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't say, I don't have any questions, because that's going to come off the feeling of you're not interested in the role.
Right.
What about the role? What about certain things that you want to know about? Ask those questions,
Right.
because they want to know your interest level. I always say to any candidate, if the interview turns into a conversation, you won the interview, because that person is trying to find out more about you as a candidate.
Yeah.
If it doesn't become conversational and it still feels like y'all don't know each other, and it's still into all right, they're still asking questions to find out more about you. No, it should be a free flow at that point once they've gotten past the initial questions that they wanted to know.
Yeah. Well, and there's that one universal question that's there's no right answer, but when you get asked, what are your weaknesses? What's the right answer to
Yes.
that question? I know you turn it into a strength and say, my weakness is my strength, but how do how do you answer that appropriately?
So for me, and what I've advised, if you are speaking to a weakness, you speak to your weakness and then you speak to how you have worked to improve the weakness. That's the one thing that I find that works the best. If you just say, well, my weakness is this, and you don't have anything else to say behind it,
Yeah.
That lets me know that you're giving up on something. So a company could say, okay, well, as soon as we find their weakness, they're going to give up on it. So I'm moving on to the next candidate. Tell them how exactly how you've been working through to make that better
Yeah.
on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah.
And once you have gotten to the point where it's no longer a weakness, it's kind of gotten to that middle zone, and then it's going to become a strength, then uncover other weaknesses that you have. Because as you're working, you're going to find what you don't do well, no matter what you're doing, no matter what career field that you're in. You're going to find something that, man, I'm not good at this. I need to work on this. Whether if it's a LinkedIn learning course or a EDX course to make myself better, start learning a little bit more about it. Or, as I always say, upskilling.
Yeah.
You're going to have an opportunity to where you're going to be able to move up through this company, through the ranks. There may be certain skills that you need to gain while you're in your career. Keep upskilling. Don't stay stationary. Find different things that you're interested in. And then when you're interested in a role, you look at the job description and you say, I have that skill, I have that skill, I have that skill. Maybe this one I don't have. All right, guess what that is? It's a weakness.
Yeah.
So I need to work on my weakness. I need to work on how I make myself better, whether if that's getting a coach, a mentor, or taking some courses to make myself a little bit better. Take time to hone your career. It's the mind never stops learning.
Yeah.
And that's something else that I advise the younger candidates. You're still in your learning phase. You haven't even scratched the surface. And I'm still scratching the surface on a lot of things at the age of 40. So you are still scratching that surface, trying to find your way through your career. Guess what? Take time to learn something else,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
take time to get some advice from someone that you haven't gotten advice from before. They may be able to give you a hidden gem, that something that they see in you that you haven't even uncovered. And that goes back to finding that one skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, through this conversation, we put a lot of responsibility on the side of the candidate and given a lot of practical advice and things to carry out to make themselves a stronger candidate. Um, and along with that, if there's a disconnect, even a repeated disconnect, it isn't always the candidate's fault, right? If
Correct.
it's in the on the company or the institution side, they say we keep posting and we keep looking for candidates and we're just not finding the right ones and it happens over and over and we can never place the right people.
Mhm.
There could be something happening on the other end too. What are some of the things that could be going wrong there?
All right. So one thing, couple things that I've noticed. So you're still looking for the right candidate. You're still haven't uncovered it. You know, I went back and I talked about handshake, where it's a bunch of candidates in just one bucket, and you're just trying to pull out and find the right one. I feel that, companies need to make themselves a little bit their presence felt on college campuses. Some companies have done this. Some companies are kind of just a little standoffish, I can say, and they're like, well, this is our approach, this is what we're going to do, and we'll just keep going. Well, to me, your turnover rate will continue to turnover, turnover, turnover.
Yeah,
And then your reputation as a company kind of goes down. And that goes back to talking about, earlier in the conversation where I had the company where, um, we continue to send people over there and then they end up coming back and they're not successful. So that lets me know there's a culture problem. So on the back end of that, let's just say from the company's perspective, if you haven't dived in to try to find out, okay, let me go to this school, let me go to that school. What are they predominantly their majors? What are they really good at? Who do they churn out for the best candidates? Go to those schools and find what they do best. If it's a technology school, it could be a Georgia Tech, it could be a Texas Tech, it could be a small school that I went to, Northwestern State University, where you find that you can find those coders, you can find those tech students, and you can bring them in, and they're going to be ready to learn, they're going to be ready to rock and roll. But when you don't do any level of reach out and it's just bland, most students are going to be like, well, who are you? What are you about? What is your culture about? And sometimes we miss that. It's, as a recruiter, we're stuck in the middle. We're in the middle of the madness. we're watching the student complain, and then we're saying the company is kind of like, well, we're just going to continue to do it this way. For any student that is out there, first advice I'll give you is that if you see that that's just not the way that you flow, there are plenty of small companies that are out there that are ready to take you on. They don't have, they're not a Fortune 10, they're not a Fortune 100, they're not a Fortune 500 company. They're just smaller companies that value their employees. So take that opportunity to work with that company, whether if it's something local or whether if it's just something that's kind of like a regional thing. Um, but look at that from that perspective of you can be successful elsewhere. Now, from the company standpoint, I don't want to tell a company what to do, but I will always say you have your company, you're going to have turnover eventually because you're going to have people that are going to retire and they're just going to leave your company altogether. Well, how are you going to bring in new talent? You can't bring in new talent using the same methods.
Right.
And that goes back to I'm a millennial, Gen Z, and other generations are coming up and they are starting to show what they want as far as a company. They do not want a company that is just a little standoffish and they can't allow them to themselves. You may have to change a little bit of your culture in order for them to want to be a part. So the recruiter is stuck in the middle. It's a is it a how do I say this? Is it an uneasy middle? Sometimes it can be because you hear it back from them saying, "Well, we're looking for this," and you hear back from the student, "Well, I'm trying to get this," and they're not on the same wavelength. They're on a different page.
Mhm.
But on the other scale of it, sometimes it is a good middle because you can communicate with both. And if this side, the company side, is saying, okay, I'm willing to work with this, it makes it so much easier to pull from. All right, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. I can move them over here and help you with this. It's it's about working together. And sometimes we forget how to work together and come together to make it easier for everyone involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your role, your specialized role as a recruiter, you have your own superpower, right? And it's facilitating and bringing together and making
Yes.
stronger. But is that what you would you call that your superpower? What would you consider yours to be?
My superpower, collaboration.
Yeah.
I can probably say that is probably ties into it. You got to be willing to work with so many different people, no matter what generation that they are from, and it's it, it's a unique superpower because everybody doesn't know the power of collaboration. Everybody is not able to collaborate. Um, but when you find that, hey, I can negotiate and I can talk to this, that, I can talk to multiple different things. Okay. Then let me show you how I can do this for you. Let me show how I can work with you on this. Or let me show you how I can connect you with this university and how you can get some on campus time to maybe have maybe a career day to where you can talk to the students and tell them what you're offering. I love those conversations because that way I'm working with this entity, I'm working with a university, and then most importantly, I'm working with a student on the same side of that fence. And it makes it to where it's just beautiful. So if you're playing the piano and you don't have a missed note, that's what that sounds like. It's just beautiful. But when you don't have that, you're gonna have those missed notes and it's not gonna sound good at all. And it turns into for some folks they end up just quitting. They're just not built for it, and you see that in the age of recruiting. Some people just move out of the career altogether. It's too frustrating. But if you hang in there just a little bit, you might be able to find those companies that you can work with. And if you can get maybe 20 to 25 companies that you can work with and you're comfortable with working with them, you really may not need anything else because you got maybe your education, you may have your oil and gas, you may have your professional services, etc., that you can pull from between those 20 to 25 different companies.
Right.
So
This is great.
collaboration is key.
Collaboration and specialization.
Yes.
Yeah. This is great. Thank you, Jeremy. I know that a lot of those on the job market and especially early career candidates will get a lot out of this conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Yes, you are welcome. I am hoping that this conversation, and Aaron, I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to some of these different things because I give a little bit of a different scale, especially working with some colleges and some universities. Thank you for giving me the platform just to speak and probably provide some knowledge to those who could be struggling.
This is great. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.